Hello, introverts and extroverts. I'd like to preface that I'm still trying to figure out what kind of content works for my channel, so who knows if I'll ever make another one of these story times or if you guys will even like this video. So if you do end up enjoying this new format, please comment, like, subscribe so that I know. My main motivation is making stuff that I know you guys will appreciate, so with that, on to the story. Now, back in high school, I was a very introverted person, a stretch of the imagination, I'm sure. And before I had the wonderful friends I do now, I had two older groups of friends. This story is about one of those old friend groups, but more specifically about a girl who I didn't want to have a part in this group. To provide context, a lot of people in my school didn't like this girl. For most people, it was because of her looks. She had an underbite and this piercing, blue-eyed stare that would just stare right into the depths of your soul. And also she was plus size, which I have no issues there because I'm plus size myself. For me, it was her behavior towards me that led me to not feeling comfortable around her. We'll call this girl Chloe. So what exactly did this Chloe do to get me to write a script after a sleep-deprived 3 a.m. morning? A lot of things. In high school, during gym class, we'd have 5 minutes before and after where we'd change our clothes. Therefore, all the girls are in a locker room together. Now, I'm an extremely self-conscious person, so the only person I want talking to me, especially while I'm underdressed, is my trusted friends. One specific day, however, Chloe got right up next to me and asked, "Do you like it when your boobs bounce while you run?" Excuse me? Do you like it when your boobs bounce while you run? Because I notice them bouncing everywhere when you run and when you walk down the stairs. Do you like it? Do you like knowing that I like it? I seriously wish that I was joking. I told her no, and that asking someone that is highly inappropriate. You know, just teaching her a valuable life lesson to avoid a talk from HR in her future career. From then on, I believe I changed in the shower area until I felt somewhat safe again. Oh, you thought it stopped there? During high school, if a teacher was absent, they would send us to a different room where they put all the other classes that had an absent teacher that day, just to work on assignments or on a worksheet. And one day, not only was the teacher absent, but so were my friends. Hoi, Jess. Hey, Chloe. God, not this girl again, I swear. If she makes one more comment about my chest, I'm gonna lose it. Do you want to watch a video of my dog getting raped? What the fuck? I'm just going to give you a moment to process that, because I know I sure as fuck did. Why the fuck would I want to see that? Why the fuck do you have that? And why are you offering to show it to people? Well, because it's funny. I don't think it's fucking funny. I'm not watching that shit, and if you try to, I will take that phone and shove it up your ass. Okay, well, I didn't say that last part, but I did tell her off. Now, I'm not a confrontational person by any means, but if you try to do something so fundamentally corrupt as to show me an inappropriate video of your animal being harmed sexually, even after I said fuck no, I will give you a huge ass fucking lecture before leaving. Now, clearly, I would avoid this girl whenever I could, but obviously it's hard when that girl is in most of your classes. However, my friend group at that time, not my current one of course, invited her to join us in our friend group. Obviously, I was livid having to deal with her at lunchtime, too. Hey, Abel, why do you always invite Chloe to eat with us? She makes me really uncomfortable and always makes comments about my body and doing inappropriate things towards— You're just so selfish. Huh? Because she's ugly, right? That's why you don't want her hanging out with us? Her looks don't have anything to do with it. I am her friend because no one else wants to hang out with someone that looks like her. And if you have a problem with that, you're just as shallow as the rest of this school. Unlike me, who can see past it. She's staying friends with me whether you like it or not. So, after that, I just stopped hanging out with that group of friends. They clearly didn't care how uncomfortable I was around Chloe. For me, it truly had nothing to do with how she looks, but with how she talked to me about sexual topics that I told her many times, politely and rudely, that it made me uncomfortable. I only bring it up because if people don't know my reasoning, they would think I just didn't like her because of how she looked, since she was unconventionally attractive kind of thing. You know what I'm saying. And I'd like to point out that I hated Abel's action of only being friends with Chloe because she feels bad, and not because she genuinely enjoyed Chloe's company and thought that she was a good person because she was friends with her out of pity. She was pity friends with a lot of people. Any kind of person she found less fortunate or less attractive than her to make herself feel superior. She might have even felt pity towards me, who knows? I personally would rather be left alone than be friends with someone who didn't like me but just hang out with me because it made them look better or they felt bad that I had no one else. I want people surrounding me that genuinely care about my well-being and my interests and, I don't know how to finish the sentence. Anyway, let's move on. The last time I saw Chloe was at prom. We had ours in October of 2020, because COVID caused us to move the date back, even though we were all in college by then. I showed up in a poofy silver dress, let's just say that they showed off my assets. Now, prom night, I was already pretty uncomfortable. I realized as I was there that I'm regretting this dress being so revealing as I'm unattractive in the first place. And that my friends took more than an hour to show up, and it was COVID, so we weren't allowed to get up. We just had to sit at our assigned tables. Before the event, the school had us fill out a form to decide the seating arrangements. I wrote down my friends' names, of course, and I remember clearly writing, "Do not put me near Chloe." And I was one of the first people to show up, so I see my name on a table. And then right across from me, I see Chloe's name. So I'm led to believe 3 things. So either Chloe wrote to sit next to me at my table on her list, or Miss Abel decided she didn't want to sit next to Chloe, and didn't put Chloe's name on her sheet. Who knows? Or the more likely reason could be that they just needed a free seat to put Chloe in and no one else put Chloe on their little name things, so they put her at our table because, she'd fit right in with the quiet artist friends. Don't put them next to the popular jock people or the nerds or, I don't know, cheerleaders or something. What other stereotypes are there? Anyway. So, in the hour that it took for my gorgeously, fashionably late friends to show up, I love you guys, but damn, I was alone for a fucking hour. I had to sit in silence, worrying that I'd be alone all night with this girl staring right at my chest. The one night I wear something other than a hoodie or a turtleneck in order to feel pretty for once for myself and my friends, I am left feeling uncomfortable and vulnerable and stared at. Okay, I think I'm done talking about Chloe. Let's move on to another classmate that was just batshit insane. For my first year of college, I took a 1-year course of pre-animation and illustration, since my portfolio failed to get me into animation my first year. A first failure in many for animation for me. Anyway, it was the first full year of COVID, so I was doing college from home over Zoom. And we'll call this other girl Penny. Penny was overconfident and didn't have the skills to back up her massive ego. She would give unsolicited feedback on other people's work, talk endlessly about herself and her own projects, and overall think that her work was above other people's and above receiving criticism even from her professors. Not to brag, but in that year of college, I was an A student, so I think I did a pretty good job at drawing and following the teacher's advices. However, this was despite the fact that every single class, Penny would have a breakdown over Zoom. For context, in a class, the teacher would spend the time going over our work and giving us feedback, doing it publicly unless you asked specifically not to. And if Penny received any feedback that wasn't praising her, she'd throw a screaming fit and cry for 20 minutes. And I kid you not, almost exactly every time it would be for 20 minutes, if not longer. Most of the teachers threatened multiple times to kick her from the call or force her to mute, and then after a few minutes she'd just unmute her mic and scream and whine. After a few lessons of this happening, I told my mom about it, and she thought that I was exaggerating. But one day, she took the day off because being a nurse during COVID was draining, and she walked into the kitchen.
Oh, but Professor, I worked so hard on it. Can I just keep it that way?
Penny, the hand is facing the wrong way, and in such a way that the wrist would be broken if someone were to, put it in that position, and their smile is going into their eye. I'm just saying, all you have to do is move the lips down and, change the position of, oh god. Penny, not to be mean or anything, but your mic is fucking on. Penny, please turn off your mic so I may continue with the lesson. Penny. Penny. Oh. I thought you were exaggerating about how insane she was.
Professor.
Nope. Alrighty then, I'll just leave you to it. Now, allow me to give you two examples of her breakdowns, one related to her receiving valid criticism, and another one related to her getting scolded. Now, for context, for you non-artist people in the audience, a layout is a drawing of a background. It has no characters or anything that would otherwise be animated. We had a layout class because, drawing backgrounds is hard, and in animation there's a lot of backgrounds when you're watching a film or a show, So we had an assignment where we had to draw a bedroom. It had no requirements other than that you had to have a bed, and it couldn't be empty, so you had to have, posters, walls, desk, all that jazz. So remember how I said that there can be no characters in a layout? The teacher explained this many, many, many times, that you never ever draw a character or an animal in these assignments, any assignment in a layout class. Can you already take a guess at what Penny did? I can't remember exactly if there was 3 or 5 characters in her layout drawing, but it was a lot of characters that, didn't have to be put in there. The teacher calmly reminded her that, characters aren't allowed in the scene.
But Professor!
I wish I was able to convey to you how loud and whiny and loud and screamy and loud and just turn off your fucking mic, Penny. You guys only have to deal with this for one video. I've had to deal with this for I don't know how many classes at this point, but anyways, she argued with the professor that she should be allowed to add characters because she already drew them in the scene, and how she had to restart completely, which is lies because she could just erase the characters and fill in the blanks. But I can understand being upset about unfair criticism, but he said several times, and it was written in the paper for the requirements, that there should be no characters at all. I don't care if she was screaming and crying, if her mic was muted. But no, she had to make sure that her pain was announced to everyone during class time. Just off script, quickly. I remember there was one time that she was screaming and crying, and then she went into the next room without turning off her mic, and then had an argument with her dad, and the professor did nothing. Didn't, kick her out of the call because she wasn't near her computer. Nothing. We just had to listen to her dad yell at her while she was screaming and crying. Back to the topic at hand, another instance of her breaking down was during life drawing. Now, in life drawing, you have a nude model that you draw. I have seen many a different bodies in my time. And some of my favorite things was doing longer studies of parts of the body. Now, since it was COVID and over Zoom, during that time, the models wore like beige or like, skin colored bras and underwear to avoid the students taking screenshots, which is understandable. Doesn't take away from drawing other than losing the natural sag of the chest area, which, isn't really needed. And life drawing is a very professional and productive time to study the human form and the many poses and emotions that can be conveyed from it. And this day we had a male model. He was a cool dude, and he'd always have props or costumes at the end of class to have us draw silly little doodles of him. And this man was a conventionally attractive, late 30s, early 40s guy. He had the kind of body that was a tiny bit chubby, but still very, muscly at the same time. Oh man, I love drawing different body types. Anyway, we were all sketching him, and he had his back turned away from us in a pose, kind of like he was praying or something. And suddenly, without warning,
"You have such a big, juicy ass!"
So, yeah, the teacher had to scold her, understandably so. These models come in to work for us, standing fully still, typically naked, in order for us to study the human form, not for us to gawk at their physical appearance, whether she meant it positively or not. Receiving a comment like that as you're trying to work must have been so uncomfortable for him. And I'd imagine if the roles were reversed and it was a male saying that the woman's ass looked juicy and big, that he'd get a harsher scolding. And yes, she did have a crying fit and screamed after being told not to catcall a guy as he's only in his underwear doing a pose for us. And luckily, after I graduated from the course, I moved on to animation, and I never heard from her again. I don't know if she took an illustration course, or went straight to working, or quit, or what have you. But yeah, essentially, she was very much an oddball who didn't want to receive help no matter how much the students, including me, suggested ways for her to receive help, because clearly she needed it and she didn't want it, and you can't help those kinds of people. If her show is eventually able to be made, as much as I hope for it to be good, I can't imagine working with someone like that, honestly. And I realize that this video might make me seem like an asshole, but these two girls and the anger/disgust I feel towards them will be enough rage to last me until the end of my days. And there are very few people in this world that I hate, and those two aren't one of those, surprisingly. I understand they're both fairly young, even if both their actions could have been avoided with common sense. I tend to forget how quickly I've matured in high school and middle school, whatever. So please let me know in the comments if you've ever had a classmate that's made you angry or uncomfortable with their mere existence. Hello, introverts and extroverts. As you know, in my Q&A video, I got asked this question, and ever since I decided to take a peek inside of my mind palace and recall other batshit insane things that I've witnessed my classmates saying or doing. And I think I found just enough things to rant about, so I hope you folks enjoy it. Let's start off with a bit of a mystery, shall we? Back in the day.
Jingle, jingle, jingle.
Back in the day, in elementary school, my school had an extremely small population. They did what a lot of small schools did back then and merged our grades together. And it was not just 2 grades that were squished together, it was 3. And in this particular story, I was in the 4th grade, which meant that we were the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders all in one big class. And even then, we were like 15 kids in total. And I remember the daily schedule of elementary school, you know, eating, drinking, learning, watching other kids eat glue. But in my elementary school, and I don't know if all schools did this back then, we had like this bathroom time where teachers had to take 15 minutes out of teaching to bring all 15 kids to the bathroom, and I think this was to avoid students constantly asking to go or like keep us supervised. And one day the women's bathroom was taped up, like caution tape, the whole 9 yards, and no one really knew why, but the teachers just decided to let all of us into the boys' bathroom, which was inconvenient to say the least, because in this specific men's restroom, there was only 2 stalls, and the rest was just lined up with urinals. Which was inconvenient to say the least, because we were so used to having our bathroom just be lined up with stalls, so now most of us had to wait. And by most, I meant me, because not only was I the tallest out of girls my age, but just my, like, classmates didn't like me because of how I looked. So I risked not being able to go to the bathroom because they only allowed us like 15 minutes to go to the bathroom, and I had to wait for 7 other girls to go before me. We also weren't allowed to go in while the boys were using the bathroom, so that was even less time for me to actually go to the bathroom myself. Which made the whole sharing the same bathroom for 15 minutes not exactly the best time. Almost made me consider throwing my bullies into one of the urinals. After a few days of this new routine, everyone started to get a bit agitated because we weren't able to use our own bathroom. But as we walked for bathroom time, suddenly, a godsend. It was open to use again, before immediately being broken again the next day. Now, this became the new normal. One day it would be fixed, and then the next day broken again. Fixed, broken, broken. I just want to piss! Everyone, and I mean everyone, was curious as to why the only women's bathroom in the entire school was constantly broken. And one day, the principal, out of the blue, investigated all the girls in my class, checking our bags and ourselves, then left, in which afterwards we heard an announcement. Whichever girl keeps shoving apples into the toilets, can you please stop? What the fuck? So, allegedly, a girl was clogging the toilets with apples. Since it seemed like the teachers weren't really doing anything, all of us were trying to take things into our own hands by investigating each other. My bullies tried to blame me, but joke's on them, I only ever brought one thing to school at that point: 2 slices of bread and a single slice of ham. That sad excuse of a sandwich was all I ever brought to school for lunch, as a child. What? I was 8 years old and I had to pack my own lunches! God, I can't even smell a ham sandwich anymore without wanting to gag. Anyways, oh god, they were so fucking dry! So, who was it that kept shoving apples into the bathroom? It just had to be someone from our grade, only someone quote-unquote older. I said that in quotes because you're like, what, 8 to 12 years old when you're in the older end of elementary school? Only someone older would be able to pull off this kind of crime. And obviously it had to be a girl, because a guy would easily be more noticeable if they were seen in and out of the girl's bathroom. I was telling my little sister about this because she was in the grade under me, which meant that she was in the merged class of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders. I told her to keep an eye out since I couldn't find any girls, let alone anybody in my grade, sneaking out of class. And by God, did she find out who the apple clogger was. So, picture this. She was in the bathroom alone during lunch. When she heard someone entering, she managed to catch a glimpse of someone leaving.
Who's that Pokemon?
I know this one! It's Pikachu!
It's Stanley!
Fuck! Wait, hold up. Stanley. The Stanley. The little third grader in my little sister's class that was obsessed with her. That Stanley? He had been breaking into the gosh darn women's toilet just to break the toilets with apples? My little sister obviously reported that she saw Stanley leaving the women's bathroom. When confronted by the principal on it, Stanley started crying and complaining. I don't entirely blame him though, he was like, what, 6, 7 years old? They eventually pressed him enough that he started confessing that he just had to hide his apples somewhere to avoid eating them. The women's toilet was the obvious answer, I guess. His complete logical reasoning for this is because his mother was the lunch guard, and he had to find a new way to dispose of his apples, since his mom got upset that she kept finding them in the trash can. If I were in his situation, I feel like the more logical thing would be to throw it in the garbage can of the women's bathroom, not attempting to flush them down the toilet and breaking it. So basically this kid kept seeing that his female classmates kept getting inspected and how upset we were that we couldn't use our own bathroom, and he saw the plumbers constantly parked outside and thought it was a good idea to keep doing it every single lunch period. Absolutely insane. Speaking of elementary school, I've seen a lot of children getting injured doing what I thought was insane shit. Like, I always was cautious and polite as a kid. As far as I remember, I didn't eat glue, I always colored inside the lines, I cleaned up after myself. At least as far as school was concerned. I'm sure at home it was a different situation. But I feel like compared to most kids, I had a good head on my shoulders. But like, I was never pretentious about it, I just wanted to be a good kid. So seeing these kids fuck around and finding out, I was like, what did you think was going to happen? I remember in particular this one kid, he was in 6th grade, and I was still in 4th grade. I don't remember his name, but we'll just call him Xavier. We were playing on this giant play structure. And what the older kids liked doing back in recess was to climb to the very top part of the structure and jump off of it, which I always thought was dangerous because it is. The structure was like a story tall, and the ground of the playground was lined with small rocks. Yes, an elegant assortment of pebbles, the perfect material for kids to run around and push each other in. Jeez, the late 2000s were crazy. But Xavier wanted me to see that it wasn't so dangerous so that my 8-year-old ass could try risking a skull fracture. Just see, it's not so scary, it's fun! Woo! Xavier? Are you okay? Oh. You don't look okay. He was fine. He just needed some band-aids for a day or two, but even as an adult, I may not remember Xavier or what his name actually was, but for whatever reason, I remember that day. Before my old elementary school shut down, at that point, all that was left was the swing set, since they'd remove each structure after a kid got hurt on it, no matter how minor the injury. Like, I remember one structure, the only reason it was removed was because a kid got a splinter on it. They kept contemplating taking down the swings, but then they realized that the kids would have absolutely nothing to do during recess if they did. Let's jump back to when I was like 13. So you remember that commenter that asked if I remembered anyone else from high school that was just as bad as Chloe and Abel? No. But I actually wanted to go more into depth about Abel and another friend from that friend group, Rosalind. Another made-up name there for you. Let's start with Rosalind first, and this leads more into some backstory time, and I know how much you guys love some good old cartoonist lore. In my early days of middle school, I was a very, very lonely kid. Since I wasn't stuck in a small classroom full of people who hated me in elementary, I was able to leave the friend group that would constantly bully me, hurt me, and manipulate me into doing anything they wanted, which I might go into depth about another day. But this left me going into middle school alone, deciding for myself that it was better to be a loner and invisible than be surrounded by people who didn't care about me. A few months into this, however, it started taking its toll. I wanted what other young teens had, friends to talk to and grow up with and share my passions with. I had no one. But one day we had a new kid, a transfer student. This was my chance, a girl who didn't know that I was a loser, a girl who maybe could understand me. Alright, students, today we're going to partner up. If anyone would like to team up with our newest student, Bianca, you're more than welcome to. I'll do it. The first friend I made by myself that was so similar to me, a friend that I wasn't forced to be with because of a small school population, a girl that I felt didn't pity me or wanted to use me. I just did it by being my goofy ass self. I was more than content with being a duo with Bianca, and it was just us for a long time. Then one day we got placed at the same table as Rosalind during one of our classes, and she wanted to become friends with us. We gladly accepted, as she was an artist just like me, even though having friends was something new to me and I had a lot to get used to. I'd like to think that I was a decent friend, all things considered. But in hindsight, looking back all those years ago, she wasn't. She would make fun of me constantly, but honestly, all the things she'd bully me on must have been a mask for her own insecurities, because she'd have these same problems, but worse than me. She'd make fun of my thin lips when her lips were even thinner than mine, or that my hair was too fluffy when she constantly had hers in a braid to hide her uncontrollable frizz. I remember this one time that I convinced one of my older sisters to drive me to her address that I didn't even know. I found it out because she texted me that she was going to, how can I say this in a YouTube-friendly way? Commit non-existence. That works. I do have my Invisalign in, but that works. I found her house out because, I had walked there one time with her and used my big-ass brain to find it on Google Maps. I went there to make sure that she was okay, and turns out she had no intentions of committing non-existence that night. She was just texting everyone for sympathy, attention, desperation, who knows? She made it even seem that I was, rude for showing up to her house unannounced, even though that I kept texting her frantically and calling multiple times and telling her that if she didn't answer me within an hour that I was going to check up on her. Considering that she said that she was going to end it all and then ghosted me and Bianca. Excuse me, princess, if I just wanted to make sure that you didn't end yourself over a breakup with a guy you only dated for 2 weeks. Just normal middle school shit. Shit that wasn't a 13-year-old's responsibility to deal with. Yet I did it because I cared about her, but she made me feel like I was inconveniencing her because I wanted to make sure that she wasn't dead. And what's worse is after that, she started bullying me worse than before, although it wasn't anything major. Like, obviously, I dealt with worse shit in elementary, but she would just make fun of how my art looked, even though she clearly traced her artwork, which she would deny because she still drew it on a piece of paper, therefore she made it. She'd make fun of my weight, etc. And lastly, she was the reason that I was introduced to Abel. Rosalind brought Abel into our friend group without asking, and you know me, I'm an introvert, always have been, and I like keeping my friends' circle small, quality over quantity and all that jazz. But I let it go. A group of 4 isn't that bad, but the problem with Abel is that she made that group go from 4 to 6 to 8 to 10, which drove me insane. I didn't know these girls that I was having lunch with. None of these girls cared about me on anything more than a superficial level, no matter what I did to try and connect with them. But that's how Abel and Rosalind functions. They just want an audience of people to listen to them yap and do things for them without putting in the work that a platonic relationship requires. It's almost like they were trying to create a little army of yes men that were obsessed with them, because the only thing that all these girls had in common with each other is that they either knew Abel or they knew Rosalind. Like, they did that kind of thing where if you even politely disagreed with them, the rest of the group would shun you until you apologized to either Abel or Rosalind, whoever one of them you pissed off. And Abel and Rosalind weren't even considered, like, popular girls or anything. It's just outcasts and, like, loners, the people that they would befriend, weren't brave enough or knew well enough to stand up against them, so they would just continue ruling over this group of people. Anyways, going into more depth on Abel, just watch any kind of pick-me-girl video and you essentially get the vibes that she puts out. She's egotistical and superficial, only forming connections with people if they are yes men or people that she can use. She'd befriend loners and outcasts, only to make herself look better, like she was doing these people a favor by being their friends, not because she had any sort of care or connection or interest with these people. If you weren't talking about her, she'd change the subject to be about herself. She would cry in the middle of class just to get an excuse to go to the principal's office, so that she'd have a story later in the day to tell everyone passing by. And these aren't just one-time occurrences, like she would do the crying in class thing at least once a week, because everyone knew everything about her, so she'd have to figure out ways to, like, make up stories about herself to tell people. Another thing is that she'd constantly, and I mean constantly, complain about being fat despite being one of the most normal and healthy-sized girls in our grade, which made me, a plus-sized teenager who had an ED, feel real good about myself. Especially when I'd spend my whole lunch period not eating, hearing her talk about how the last thing she'd want to be is obese, while me and Bianca, both way bigger than her, are sitting right there. I can't believe how fucking fat I look. And I, would hate to be fat like you guys. But, being fat, looks good on you. It really does, yeah. Thanks. When I stopped being friends with them after the whole Chloe situation, watch part 1, I hung out with my 2 new lifelong friends at the time, which is what I would have said, but unfortunately over the past few months that friendship has ended. The reason for the fallout being because I wouldn't break up with my partners like they told me to, because they figured they were lying to me, because, who could possibly be attracted and fall in love with me? Anyways, I'm not gonna talk about it in any more detail than that. As for what happened when I stopped being friends with Abel and Rosalind and Bianca, a few months later, one of these friends that I'm not friends with anymore needed some space from us for a few weeks. Never learned the reason why. But during that friendship break, she decided to hang out with these ex-friends of mine, and when she came back a few weeks later, she explained that basically all these girls did all day long was talk shit about me just because I set boundaries of not wanting to be friends with someone who made very inappropriate comments about me. Again, watch part 1. So, you know what? Good riddance to Abel and Chloe and Rosalind. I'm glad I got out of that friend group. That's all for today, and honestly, as I'm writing this script, I'm not sure if this is all that entertaining, although I do think that most of the time when writing my video scripts. I think next time, if I'm going to talk about any more school experiences, it'll be about the bullying that happened to me, but like, I would need to mentally prepare a lot for that kind of video. Hello, introverts and extroverts. Did you ever have a teacher that just didn't like you for seemingly no reason? I know I have, and all throughout middle school and high school, pretty much all my teachers liked me. They either saw me as a decent kid or I was one of their favorites. I mean, I see why. I put clear effort into my work, even if I didn't always, get the right answer. But I was a good old A to B student. And this story time takes place when I was in about middle school, so I was like 13 to 14, maybe leaning more into that 14-year-old version of myself. And the sole reason I was so successful in my grades during those years, it wasn't from studying or paying attention in class, it was from drawing. I would draw during class time, and pretty much all the teachers knew this and accepted this because drawing helps me process information. Notes just didn't cut it for me. Hell, some teachers would even get sad if I didn't draw on my homework or on tests. One teacher, however, had an issue with this, and we'll call him Mr. Ego. Yep, that's going to be his fake name because that's exactly what he has, a massive ego. He absolutely loved hearing himself talk, going on long tangents that had nothing to do with the actual lesson, and getting moody anytime a student would try to get him back on topic. He'd get upset if you were to write down notes from the slides, because you need to pay attention while he talks, and you need to see everyone's eyes on him. So, you can see why me drawing in order to pay attention got on his nerves. And now, just to give a tiny bit more context, around ages 12 to 14, I started getting more serious about art. Art was always just a hobby at that point. And around that age, I was ready to take it seriously, and I wanted this to be my life, and I wanted to be able to draw every day for the rest of my life, or else I wouldn't be happy. This is the reason why I'm living. I know my art looks goofy sometimes, and I don't always draw it right, but I love doing this. And it was around this age where I started being like, yeah, this is what I want. At the time, I started becoming friends with 2 students who are now still very dear friends of mine, and they encouraged this passion, and they still do. Back then, the way I became friends with them was by making up these 2 little silly original characters called Ted Bear and Mr. Fabulous. My first ever gay couple. I was a young pansexual who didn't know she was pansexual or even what the word gay was. So having Ted Bear and Mr. Fabulous was a way for me to figure out queerness for myself in that cringy middle schooler shipping way. The comics I made about them were about 36 separate stories. Yes, I counted recently just for this video. And I only worked on them during classes from middle school to end of high school, and oh boy, I wish I had that much free time and dedication to work on my own shit. I'll never release these old comics, as not only is it really cringy, but it gives me nostalgia like you wouldn't believe. I'd like to keep these mementos for myself But essentially, to give a summary, Ted Bear was a survival TV show host. Think someone like Coyote Peterson. He was Australian and basically the straight man to the shenanigans happening all around him, which I say straight man ironically because he was actually bisexual and didn't realize it because he was so far back into the closet, he didn't realize that the closet doors were made out of glass. He has a special bond with bears as he was raised by them after his family sold him to a loan shark in order to pay off their debt. And the loan shark they sold him to left him out in the woods to die since he was a baby and unable to be sold into child labor. Man, that's fucking dark. Then you have Felix Fabulous, a German model who's very open about being gay. At first, he was a very stereotypical gay guy lusting over Ted in an almost obsessive way. As the comics went on, his feelings turned into genuine care for Ted. It was a constant will they, won't they story as Mr. Fabulous would chase after Ted, and Ted would avoid his advances, which turned into Mr. Fabulous's intense passion mellowing out as Ted starts to realize that he likes the new, mature version of his friend that he had known for years. He realizes this when I made an episode about Ted and Felix visiting Felix's homophobic parents. Ted realizes that this openly proud gay man has been hiding such an intimate part of himself from his parents, and he starts to see him in a new light and fall in love. So yeah, like I said, cringy middle school, writes edgy, romantic comedy with darker undertones and crude humor. So every class I would work on this comic, as this thing was really important to me and my friends, and they'd constantly ask if I was close to finishing up the next page. Mr. Ego had already warned me not to draw in his class, but I mean, I use it to focus. Does he just not want me to focus in his class? But after that class, I had patiently told them I wouldn't be able to learn without it, and I was already an A+ student in his class, so clearly drawing isn't a distraction for me. But the next class, as I took out my comic, I was quietly working as he was talking, not bothering anyone else. Yoink. Huh? I told you not to draw in my class. And I told you I can't focus without it, but fine. I'll stop drawing. Just give it back to me, please. I'm almost tempted to read this silly thing out loud, but I'll keep this to myself. And I'll give it back to you when class is over. A week. He kept my comic for a whole week, and I'd see him in the hallways reading it out loud to other students who were curious. And at some point, I just accepted the fact that I wouldn't have my page back. And keep in mind, this was 1 out of 36 stories that he took away, and that page was nearly halfway through. So it was a lot of time and effort to get to that point, because I think that was episode like 12 he took away. So understandably, I was embarrassed and heartbroken that my art was taken from me and passed around like it was a joke, and when you're that young, that shit sticks with you. After that week, the teacher does the most embarrassing shit that every kid hates. Everyone's just quietly working for the work period, and the fucking asshole loudly announces, "Miss Jess, I need to speak with you out in the hallway. You guys got that? She's in fucking trouble." Okay, he didn't say that word for word, but that's essentially what he announced. "Listen here, kid. This is a French Catholic school. I get you want to have your little gay couple, as disgusting as that is, but the real crime here is you drew 2 girls looking at a man who is topless. Ba ba ba." It kind of reminded me of that scene in Oral where Clay's like, "Crack is a gateway to slang." And hell, Ted being topless wasn't even the worst shit that was in my comic. I'm so glad he only took that 1.5 pages. And also, this is the kind of art skill level I had back then. And essentially, here's what Ted looked like when he was topless. I didn't even give him nipples. A normal person would probably just think I forgot the 3 lines that would have gave him a shirt, because it was the exact same. Man, if he saw the shit I do now in life, drawing where people are actually naked, he'd be fucking clutching his goddamn pearls. And he's acting like I did was such a crime, even though he was showing other students a topless man drawing. Ooh, scandalous. I mean, it's not that bad. You see topless guys all the time outside in the summer. A topless woman, however, I get it, but you're really just trying to make something out of nothing. I can point out something even worse that you overlooked 3 panels before that, but I don't want to get myself in more trouble. Well, Jess, I think because of this topless man drawing, I'm going to have to contact your mother so she can discipline you.
No.
Yes, I can call her right now with you in front of me.
Mr. Ego, I beg of you, my mom might beat my ass. Not for the topless guy thing, but for the gay shit that was in there, so please.
Because, once again, I was a closeted pansexual from a religious household, and I didn't want my ass getting kicked out at 14. But anyways, my mom's really supportive of my panness, so, now that I'm out of my own glass closet, I love you, Mom. But kid me didn't know that shit, so obviously I was scared of her finding out I was writing a queer comic. Well, alright then, I won't contact your mother. You do get good grades in my class, and you've never acted out like this before, so I'll let it slide. But I better not see you even holding a pencil in my presence unless you're prompted to. So, out of spite, instead of drawing, I would just disassociate in class, just boringly letting my mind wander, imagining what all other teenage girls think about at that age. Their favorite fictional character falling in love with them at first sight. Man, every character I had a crush on as a kid would absolutely hate me at that age. Anyway, after that, Mr. Ego would watch me like a hawk, or call on me often for answers, because when I was drawing and actually focused, I could answer the questions no problem, but now since I was zoning out in class and bored out of my mind, I couldn't pay attention at all. Luckily, Mr. Ego was the only shitty teacher I can remember. If you like this little story, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more.